for 4 years, Biden obliterated the border. 11 million people came in, and the bill I was working on would have prevented that. He took everything we were trying to do to stop illegal immigration, be fair to the ones here, and blew a hole in it, and now we got 11 million more, and you want to give them amnesty. They'll never stop. Senator Grassley.
Yeah. The United States is a country based on the rule of law, and it's against the law to enter our country without our permission. And I compliment the chairman for having this hearing and his strong statements and his strong questioning. We all know that our country benefits from legal immigration and entering our country. This is a budget committee, and my questions will basically be based upon budget impact and cost to our government. Mr. Wolf, there are some legal limitations that prevent states from completely excluding illegal immigrants from access to some of their government programs. What are those limitations, and what immediate steps, considering those limitations, can the federal government take to minimize the fiscal burden of sanctuary jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think when we talk about public benefits, whether they're federal or state benefits, I think, and the chairman, I believe, mentioned this earlier, these are strong magnets of why folks decide to come to the United States illegally. Now, there's a variety of different reasons for them to do so, but if they're able to stay in a jurisdiction that shields them from law enforcement, that provides public benefits, particularly at the state level, but also at the federal level, both need to be looked at, that continues to incentivize those individuals to come and to stay. And so when you look at how to secure the country, it's not only border security, it's a big part of it, but it's also getting at these pull factors, and those public benefits are a big part of that. I think the American people are generous. I think they want to help people that need true help, but to have folks that come here to the country illegally, choose to stay illegally, have no protections under U.S. law, and continue to get public benefits, I think that's where the American people draw the line.
Ms. Vaughn, sanctuary jurisdictions frame their policy as squarely a matter of local policy, but we know these policies have both broader public safety and fiscal effects on areas beyond their border. So what are some examples of the cost to both the federal government and the state government caused by sanctuary policies that are often forgotten or overlooked, with emphasis upon forgotten or overlooked?
Well, I think too many of the victims of these policies have been forgotten. I named a few of them, but these families are still suffering silently. Another forgotten cost is the cost of providing benefits, taxpayer-funded social services to illegal alien households. And federal law currently allows states to choose to do that if their legislature approves it at enormous costs. And some of those dollars are federal dollars, so all of us as Americans share the cost burden of that arrangement, and Congress can do something about that. There's also the cost of the erosion of the integrity of our immigration system when individual states and jurisdictions and local jurisdictions can obstruct the enforcement of federal laws that are passed by Congress without consequence. Even though many of these sanctuary policies are clearly in violation of Section 1373 and 1644 of the Immigration Act. And so, you know, it's a slap in the face to legal immigrants to allow these policies that shield individuals from immigration enforcement, most of whom are criminal aliens. Immigrants don't want to live with these policies either. Something like 70% of the American public is opposed to sanctuary policies for all of these reasons.
Mr. Wolf, if you can answer this question, it's in regard to the 11 million people that came here under Biden and Harris. Over that period of time, did illegal immigrants seek out sanctuary jurisdictions for safe harbor? And is there any evidence to back up your statement?
Well, I think if you look historically at where illegal aliens reside, now they reside all across the United States, but if you were to do a heat map, you would see them the majority of them in places like New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and others that have these sanctuary jurisdictions. So yes, I do believe over time that illegal aliens do tend to go to these types of jurisdictions.
I got 6 seconds left. Sheriff Chapman, what are some examples of state and local cost increases those jurisdictions incur?
Well, I look at the funding that goes to our state and local, the folks that surround us, and folks that do not support, the immigration policies here, and the funding that they get. And I think if that was curtailed, maybe they might look at this a lot more seriously. But it is a cost to us. It's a cost to putting people out there. You're talking about more homicides. What you're talking about, we've had our share locally here, and certainly as the chairman brought up, and we've had them in Loudoun County, and it's a human factor that is really important here. We want to keep our people safe and keep them alive.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman.
Holland, I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wolf, if I could start with you. You would agree that in America, people have the right to peacefully protest under the First Amendment, right?
Correct.
You would agree that people have the constitutional right to due process, right?
Correct.
Would you agree with Kristi Noem, who characterized Renee Good as a domestic terrorist? Is Renee Good a domestic terrorist in your view?
I've been very clear on this point when that incident occurred, as well as the Preddy incident as well, is to let that investigation play out before any comments are made about the motives of any of the individuals involved, including the law enforcement officers.
So clearly it was wrong to label them domestic terrorists, right?
Again, I'm not at the department. I don't know what the information she had. If you're asking me my opinion, I would have waited till the investigation play out before I rendered any decision.
So you think it's still an open question as to whether or not they're domestic terrorists?
Again, I'm going to let the investigation
It sounds like
play
you
out.
do, which I think, the country has seen the videos, okay? So I find it outrageous that you would sit here today and hold open the idea that they were domestic terrorists. Their parents and their loved ones deserve an apology from the U.S. government, and I found it outrageous that you're taking the position that you are
I'm
here
not taking
today.
that position.
Yes, you are. By taking no position and leaving on the table the notion that they're domestic terrorists, you are taking a position. Mr. Beer, thank you for emphasizing the big lie, that what the Trump administration is doing is going after the worst of the worst. As Senator Merkley pointed out, and as you've shown, that's just not true. I mean, nobody wants people who are here illegally committing violent crimes. But the overwhelming majority of people who are in detention right now, by ICE's own admission, pose no risk to public safety. Is that right?
That's right. Over 70% were given no threat level at all. They could be released right now without a threat to the public.
Yeah. So this is just such a big lie. I mean, that's what we're seeing playing out in this forum and out of the White House from people like Stephen Miller and the President of the United States. Could you talk about another big lie? We do know that the so-called big beautiful bill, as Republicans called it, increased the debt massively, like over $4 trillion, right? They gave tax cuts to billionaires permanently. They cut health programs. They cut food safety, food programs. They had a walloping increase for ICE, like 7 times its regular budget. And at the same time, we hear people like Stephen Miller and others claiming that it's actually immigrants who are the cause of increasing our deficits and debt. In fact, they've said that immigration is the cause of the growing national debt, and immigrants take more from the country than they contribute. Now, Mr. Beer, you've looked at this question very closely. Could you just respond to what I think is the second big lie?
Yeah, over the last 30 years, we looked at all the government budgets, federal, state, and local combined. Immigrants reduced deficits by $14.5 trillion, which is about a third of all of the total deficits during that period of time. And it's easy to understand why, because they work at 12 percentage points higher than the national average. They use less benefits because they're subject to constraints, unique barriers to applying for those benefits, in particular Social Security and Medicare, where those are by far our largest programs, and they're not eligible for those at all if they're here in the country illegally, or if they came legally and they don't have a sufficient work history to qualify. So you have clear reasons for believing that they are reducing the deficits and debt. They are a benefit to this country, and we need more people who are going to contribute in the future as our population ages.
Could you amplify a little more on the issue of Medicare and Social Security? Because those, trust funds in just a couple years, there won't, be enough to pay out full on the dollar for Social Security and Medicare.
That's
As
right.
you pointed out, there are many immigrants that are paying in to that, but not paying out. So could you just elaborate on that?
According to the Social Security Administration, we need about 35 million more workers in order to keep revenues equal to expenses by the middle of the 2030s. So we are at a position right now where immigration is not going to solve it. Obviously, it's not going to solve it, but it is moving us in the right direction. These are people who are showing up. They're ready to work. They're often prime age individuals who are ready to enter the labor force. So it's a huge benefit fiscally to the United States to have these people who want to contribute to our country.
Thank you. And thank you for exposing two of the big lies coming out of the Trump administration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The information we have is that 64% of the people encountered bys are either convicted or pending criminal charges. So if somebody's wrong, we'll find out who's lying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, let's talk about some realities here. The ranking member talked about the funding for ICE rose dramatically this first year of the Trump administration. Well, this is why. Because for the previous 4 years, President Biden and the Democrats opened up the border. Now, I like this chart. First of all, save the president's life. But the other reason I like this chart is it shows cause and effect. And the catalyst for this explosion in illegal immigration really was deferred action on childhood arrival. That's what sparked this. That created the first incentive for people to come to this country illegally. That started the first wave. Now, back in 2014, these were massive numbers. I remember President Obama calling 2,000 a day was, a humanitarian crisis. I think under Biden, we had over 14,000 a day average. So, Mr. Wolf, you were acting secretary trying to clean up the Obama mess. I remember leading a delegation down to McAllen, Texas, during the Obama administration, where we looked at the facility they set up, and everybody, Democrat, Republican, were singing the praises of DHS for kind of skirting the rules and establishing a facility that would keep the children safe as they were being encountered and detained across the border because of the incentive of DACA. A couple years later, on the Trump administration, that exact same facility, all of a sudden now the Democrats are calling that kids in cages. But first of all, will you just confirm the fact that that was the exact same facility that we praised in 2014, and all of a sudden, 2017, those are kids in cages?
That's correct. Those were Border Patrol facilities.
I think out of your department, last year we got a memo that said of the millions, and nobody knows exactly how many millions came in here, the wide open border. It's so out of whack. 650,000 people that are at large in America have committed crimes. 15,000 murderers, 20,000 rapists. Ms. Spear, you're shaking your head.
They're not at large. The murderers are in prison. They're in prison where they should be.
They're not detained.
Yes,
Again,
they're detained by the state. They're not detained by ICE. They're in prisons ready to be deported. Now, I don't...
Ms. Vaughn, have you kept track of how many people have been murdered, raped, victims of vehicular homicide at the hands of somebody that the Biden administration led in this country?
I wish there were a way to do that, but so many law enforcement agencies do not keep track of the immigration status of people in their custody. They don't want to know.
Would you say it's in the hundreds?
Yes.
Thousands?
Yes.
Tens of thousands?
one data point that I do know is that at a certain point, a few years ago, ICE determined that there were 10,000 deportable criminal aliens who were released by sanctuary policies who subsequently reoffended within 18 months.
So where is the outrage on the other side of the aisle to those victims and their families? You know, we had a hearing and in Homeland Security, and they were talking about the trained activists. The number was very large, but I couldn't believe it. Trained activists that are trained to basically interfere and obstruct with the legal law enforcement actions. And I made the comment, I can't imagine encouraging my supporters, first of all, to get trained to obstruct justice, much less then go ahead and do it, put yourself in harm's way, knowing people are going to potentially get hurt. Well, people did get hurt. Three people lost their lives. And now the other side exploits those martyrs while they completely ignore the thousands, and let's face it, it's thousands of the Laken Rileys and those individuals. You know, where's the outrage to the crimes committed by that massive wave? And of course, I didn't want to have to spend money on ICE, but what are you going to do? And trying to clean up this mess, I mean, it's difficult enough for you to clean up Obama's mess. Try and clean up Biden's mess. And rather than getting help from the other side, no, they trained activists to obstruct trying to clean up that mess. That's the reality of the situation. That's why I agree, and I appreciate this hearing. We have to end sanctuary cities because it's just another incentive, a massive incentive for more illegal immigration. And the next time Democrats get in power, they'll open it up again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me first observe for my colleagues here that sanctuary city is a political term. It's not a technical term, as your own witness has acknowledged. And it's important to get things right. So I want to just describe what's happening in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, our federal district court has decided that local and state police officers can be held liable if they hold a person under an ICE detainer without a proper warrant, that the warrant requirement actually applies. And particularly when you're dealing with someone's freedom, detention. And that decision is not a fluke. It has been upheld by the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. So in my state, the District of Rhode Island from a federal point of view, and in my circuit, the United States Circuit Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, it is binding law that state and local officials who hold somebody under an ICE detainer where ICE hasn't bothered to get a warrant can be held civilly liable. So we need to face that fact because that's actually binding federal law. The second comment I want to make is about the behavior of ICE agents when they operate in Rhode Island. Those of you on the Judiciary Committee will remember me describing this set of affairs to then Secretary Noem. So masked agents appear in the Rhode Island Superior Court courthouse. They are operating in violation of an agreement that they have with the court not to operate in that courthouse. They are operating with cameras in violation of a courthouse rule that forbids taking photographs. They are pursuing a 30-plus-year-old individual whom they have mixed up with a high school intern who is interning for one of our state court judges. The state court judge is going to take the intern back to high school, so they walk out to the judge's car. If the ICE agents hadn't bothered to figure out who the judges were in the courthouse, when they got to the car, parked in a judges-only spot, they had the information necessary to deduce that this might be a judge. But rather than accept the judge's representations that he was returning an intern to the high school, I'll take out the full F-bomb because they used the actual full word. They told the judge, we're going to smash your effing windows and we're going to drag you out of your effing car if you don't turn over this intern to us. And then they grabbed the intern and they took him into another car for half an hour and figured out that the high school intern was not the 30-plus-year-old person they purported to be looking for. Why would regular law enforcement, why would those sheriffs in the courthouse want to cooperate with an agency whose law enforcement behavior is so wildly irresponsible and unprofessional? It's hard to imagine. And when I asked Secretary Noem about the problem of deconfliction, I think pretty much everybody in law enforcement understands what deconfliction is. Even if the state police aren't cooperating with the Bristol police, when they run in to do a raid in Bristol, they will let the Bristol police know that they're going to do a raid so that when calls come in about cars in the street or people with guns or whatever, the local police department know what's going on. Deconfliction is elementary stuff that is taught to law enforcement. And yet, ICE refuses to deconflict. And the secretary didn't know the difference between deconfliction and cooperation. So clearly there's a massive hole in the way in which DHS thinks about this stuff. And it is in that environment that I think a lot of sensible decisions are being made by local police chiefs about whether they want to cooperate with an organization that behaves in unreasonable and unprofessional ways, that threatens judges with violence, and that refuses to even give them the courtesy of deconflicting when they're operating in their jurisdiction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cornyn.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think President Trump has done it again, exercising almost magical powers, turning Democrats into budget hawks. It's an amazing thing to behold. And of course, they reflexively oppose anything and everything that he proposes, whether it's standing to honor law enforcement and public safety and not illegal immigrants, whether it's eliminating the threat of nuclear weapons and the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. They take the side of the state sponsor of terrorism. It's just amazing to me to behold. Sheriff, I was struck by the ranking member's introduction to his comments. He said, let the police be the police. And I assume that would extend to other law enforcement officers like you and the sheriffs and other folks who maintain public safety. But is the collective role and job of law enforcement officers like yourself to protect public safety?
It is, and I think we all need to work together. One of the things that was just left out of the testimony just provided is the fact that communication is important to this, and we work very well with our counterparts, and a lot of times it's because of the chiefs are driven by the politicians above them that don't allow them to actually work properly and cooperatively with our federal and other local counterparts. When you have that level of communication, you can work these issues out in advance before you have a problem like you know, what the senator was just saying.
Well, a lot of it boils down to information sharing, correct?
That's correct.
And even where in the Senator Whitehouse's circuit, the judges said that maybe local law enforcement can't keep people beyond their jail sentence without some other additional warrant. Let me ask you to go out on a limb here a little bit. If the two individuals who tragically died in Minneapolis, who interfered with law enforcement operation by ICE, if there had been the kind of cooperation that you demonstrate in Loudoun County and the sort of cooperation that you've advocated for here, do you think it's more likely than not that those two individuals will still be alive?
Well, I can't really speak directly to that. What I can tell you is that the cooperation that we've had actually works well, and I do believe that that would have had an impact there. When you're talking about 287G, and again, Senator Whitehouse's information, we have an agreement with ICE, and our people are trained in order to hold on to people for a little bit, up to 48 hours after they're incarcerated for a completely separate offense with us, okay?
That's
And
a
then we-
memorandum of understanding between the feds and local law
That's right,
enforcement.
and that way they're already in custody. All we got to do is turn them over. So they don't have to come to the community to do, very often, to do any enforcement operations. So it actually works out well, and to get on the front side of this and to have that level of communication prevents that kind of thing. But if you have politicians that are directing you to act in a particular way, it really, really messes up the system here. And I think that's largely the problem. We all want to work together. We work with everybody, all of our federal counterparts, all of our state and local counterparts, which I believe is one of the reasons we got one of the lowest crime rates in the entire country.
And you haven't, as a result of that cooperation, you haven't experienced any of the tragic consequences that we saw in Minneapolis?
That we've actually had, before that, we actually had people that had not been arrested by us that committed crimes, but anybody that's been arrested by us and turned over to ICE is not a problem. They're out of our hands.
And Mr. Wolf, you were, of course, former Secretary of Homeland Security, and our Democratic colleagues say that they won't fund the Department of Homeland Security and alleviate these long waiting periods that citizens are experiencing at airports all around the country. They won't fund FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, until federal warrants are required. Now, will you explain how a final order of deportation is a civil matter, and that requiring, after that due process has already been exhausted, why requiring a criminal warrant would be not only unnecessary, but also destructive of ICE's ability to actually enforce immigration law?
Absolutely. An alien will go before an immigration judge towards the end of their dependency of their hearing. They will go before an immigration judge and they will rule on their case. If they want to appeal that, they'll go to the Immigration Board of Appeals, and they could perhaps even appeal that outside of that. And in every case, a judge, through the due process, they'll have an attorney with them, through the due process, says you don't have a legal right to remain in the United States, and it's time for you to self-deport. It's time for you to leave. And we know, as I indicated earlier, about 1.6 million of those individuals have said, no, I'm going to defy that order. I'm going to stay here in the United States. I don't want to go back to my home country. And then ICE is coming in at the very end of this process, enforcement removal officers, to effectuate that judge's order, to understand and to remove that individual from the country. And in some cases, they are in their house. And so they have a final order of removal. They have reasonable suspicion that that individual is in that house. They have likely observed that individual go in and out of that house, and they are there to remove that individual. It's very different than a judicial warrant where you're just going in to arrest someone who's then going into the due process system, has to go before a judge, have their case heard, all the facts. That is not what is occurring when you have a final order of removal.
Thank you.
Senator Lula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone, thank you all for being here today. And I just want to begin by reminding everyone this is the first hearing of the Budget Committee in this Congress. This is the first one, 13 months into this Congress. Oh, you're saying second, sir? I appreciate that, Chairman. Second. Look, when we talk about what's happening to constituents across the country right now, you think there'd be some hearings about the high cost of everything. They're detainers, 287. I certainly hope we get to that place. But since we're here today, and we're not talking about the high cost of groceries or how expensive it is to get a birthday cake for your kids, gas prices through the roof, housing unaffordable. My Republican colleagues want to have a conversation about the one big beautiful bill that they passed, which, by the way, we've now learned from the Congressional Budget Office that the legislation increased the federal deficit by $3.4 trillion. Trillion. It's a lot of money. while failing to provide real relief to middle and low-income families. So look, the proposals tied to the package and its broader agenda included cuts to programs like food, like SNAP, providing support to millions of working families just to put food on the table. So as we sit here in the Senate Budget Committee, yes or no, and my question is to Mr. Duke, does focusing federal attention on punishing so-called sanctuary cities meaningfully address the affordability crisis Americans are facing?
No.
Does it lower health costs for child with diabetes?
No.
Does it make the gas that people put at a gas station into their vehicles more affordable to get to work, or does it make it more expensive?
It has nothing to do with gas.
Does it help a single mom afford to put food on the table?
No.
Does it address the medical solvency issues to make sure seniors can count on their benefits?
It addresses them by making them worse.
Does it help a young couple who wants to buy a home and start a family, maybe afford that house?
It does not help.
Well, what the hearing discusses does not include anything that I just asked about. And the constituents I've been talking to at home are saying, when's Congress going to get off their rears and do something about the prices that we're hitting every day, as opposed to just protecting the Epstein class and not demanding that these documents and everything else get released? So, Mr. Wolf, you had responsibilities in a few of these places, and I appreciate the responses you were providing to one of my colleagues now about the process that you believe is fair, that allows ICE agents to go into someone's house without a judicial warrant. It's hard for me to continue to listen to justification on how American citizens can have their homes broken into without a judicial warrant. I don't understand this. That American citizens, it's okay for an American citizen to have their windows on their car bashed in. That's not okay. And with all these conversations about AI and some of these companies now that are working with ICE for facial recognition, which I have concerns about, what I don't understand now is how the Department of Homeland Security has access to the best facial recognition AI. DHS says they know who the violent criminals are. Their words, they say they know who they are. And if they only had access to facial recognition, they could go find all the violent criminals. Well, why aren't they doing it? It's one unanswered question after another. It's one American right after another that is being torn apart. And there's justification now to say we can pound in your door, we can go in your house if you're an American citizen, or we can bust out your windows and drag your butt out of a car as an American citizen. I just don't get it, Mr. Chairman. And I hope we have some hearings about getting answers to that, because I think there's agreement between Democrats and Republicans on this issue. We don't want American citizens being treated this way. None of us. We want to go after the violent criminals. We both agree with this. I certainly hope that we can have a thorough and thoughtful hearing and get some answers to that as well, and that everyone agrees, stop doing that. Mr. President, tell your folks to stop doing that. I hope now that Senator Mullins, who's going to be Secretary of Health or Homeland Security, maybe he'll get these people to stop all the bad shit and to go after the bad people. Then we'll be in a better place. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have a hearing on affordability. Ms. Vaughn, what percentage of illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities or just in general receive federal benefits?
I don't have numbers for specific sanctuary jurisdictions,
Yeah, just
but
in general.
nationally, it's more than 60%.
So more than
of
60%
households, yes.
of illegal immigrants receive federal benefits, and it has absolutely no budget impact. Well, that's interesting. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thanks to each of you for being here. I want to say at the outset a couple of things. First, I'm not familiar with many countries that are asked to simply ignore their own immigration laws, separate and apart from their criminal laws, just their own immigration laws. Those countries that do exist or may have existed over time don't remain countries very long, because things happen when you don't enforce your own immigration laws. We don't have to travel very far in our own continent or throughout Europe or Asia or Africa to see what would happen if one of us entered one of those countries, took up residence there unlawfully, it likely wouldn't end well for us. I also want to observe that there's been several mention here today about the difference between state authority and federal authority, a reference to states' rights. I don't like using the term states' rights, not only because it conjures George Wallace's image, also because it's inappropriate. States don't have rights. Individuals have rights. States have authority. That's the inverse polar opposite of a right. We have parallel authority with parallel sovereign jurisdictions in this country. The U.S. government, the one headquartered in this city where we sit today, has authority over our immigration laws, laws governing naturalization, who may enter the country, who may stay under what terms and conditions or for what period of time. We do need our federal government to be able to undertake those efforts, to perform those efforts well. We've adopted a number of techniques to procure and encourage the cooperation of state and local jurisdictions. Sometimes those have been ignored, and that is unfortunate. I'll get more to that in a moment. But look, we're exploring something today that is not without cost. The cost of an unsecured border, and unprecedented illegal immigration during the 4 years of the Biden administration remain both stunning and debilitating. The Trump administration, for its part, quite fortunately, has done a very effective job at securing the border and beginning the process of deportations on a very large scale. But there's a lot of work left to be done to deport the many millions who remain in this country for us to be able to restore law and order. People who, if they did immigrated to almost any other country on earth, would be in a whole lot of trouble and would be facing those things, and yet we're made to feel as if we would be doing the wrong thing by enforcing our immigration laws as such. That important work that's being done, carried out every day by brave men and women in federal law enforcement, continues to be obstructed across the country as radical leftists who are proudly, aggressively supporting sanctuary cities try to undermine the enforcement of federal law. These Democrat-controlled state and local governments have, in many instances, been working actively, aggressively, through these sanctuary city policies to subvert not just federal law, but the enforcement of federal law by duly sworn and authorized federal law enforcement officials. They are trying to do one thing by enforcing the law, which is to prioritize the well-being of American citizens and the safety of the American homeland. This terrible reality that we face is highly offensive to the citizens of the United States, especially those who have done the work to immigrate to this country legally and to do it the right way. Now, believe it or not, not that long ago, Democrats supported, and President Clinton himself signed into law, the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, commonly known as IRIRA. That act expanded border enforcement capabilities and helped bring immigration under control at a time when illegal immigration to the United States was far less frequent, far less of a large problem than it has been in recent years. In 2016, President Trump ran for president and was elected on a promise to stop illegal immigration. Democrats intending to oppose the president at every turn decided to depart in that moment from their previous, more common sense position and to go all in on the belief that our nation should effectively have no border at all, that borders are sort of aspirational suggestions that we can look the other way on. That brings us to the topic of today's hearing, the cost of sanctuary cities. So what is that cost? Well, the cost is clear. It is waste, fraud, and abuse by illegal aliens who shouldn't be within our borders. We saw this in Minnesota, and we've seen it elsewhere. The cost is clear. More than anything else, it's the loss of human life, innocent human life, innocent American lives at the hands of illegal aliens who have perpetrated some of the most heinous attacks on innocent American lives in recent memory. And these are entirely preventable, entirely avoidable crimes, crimes that would not have happened but for our open border policies facilitated by sanctuary cities. The cost is clear. It's also the increased additional avoidable tax burden on state, local, and federal taxpayers who are expected to subsidize and, in fact, are forced to subsidize problematic social welfare programs that illegal aliens have obtained eligibility for through fraudulent means or various loopholes. to say nothing of the education system, which because of a Supreme Court ruling in Plyler v. Doe 4.5 decades ago, states are also forced, by no choice of their own, to supply that additional benefit as well. So look, the cost is clear. It's all over the place. We can't ignore it. And by continuing to ignore it, we create additional problems. Let's not dress this up as something that it is not and never can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo the sentiment that several of my colleagues have mentioned earlier in this hearing in more than just being surprised that this is, well, I guess the second hearing for this Congress, but the first of this calendar year. It is not about the federal budget, not about an economic outlook, but I understand why the Republican majority wouldn't want to talk about that. Not while gas prices are spiking because of an unauthorized war against Iran. Instead, we're here to discuss how off-base this whole sanctuary conversation really is. Now, I know it's a area of passion for the chairman. We've debated sanctuary policies on the floor of the Senate. As I've objected to the legislation he has presented that would promote federal overreach, in my opinion. I think part of my frustration comes from the fact that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what sanctuary policies are and what sanctuary policies are not. Sanctuary policies do not mean that there are no laws in sanctuary cities or states. They do not keep ICE and other federal agencies from entering a city or a state to arrest violent criminals as they're released from prison. Sanctuary policies simply affirm that immigration enforcement is the job of the federal government, and that the federal government cannot unilaterally decide to co-opt state and local authorities or their resources, precious resources, in carrying out these responsibilities. True, there's some states and local jurisdictions who may choose to coordinate, collaborate, but there's many who don't for their justifiable reasons. It means carrying out immigration enforcement activities is ICE's purview, while respecting state and local law enforcement agencies to make their own decisions about how to focus and direct their limited resources that they deem best protects and serves their constituents. It means prohibiting federal overreach through policies that have been upheld by the courts. And so I'm glad several of my Republican colleagues are here to listen to me quote Justice Scalia in the case Prince versus United States. Quote, the federal government may neither issue directives, require the states to address particular problems, nor command the state's officers or those of their political subdivisions to administer or enforce a federal regulatory program. End quote. Look, folks, we can have disagreements on policy, but the fundamental misunderstanding about what sanctuary policies are has led to the promotion of enforcement actions across the country that have become damaging to our communities and to our local economies. So it seems to me that this debate has not really been about public safety. Because if it were, we could also be talking about how the data shows that sanctuary policies actually make communities safer, healthier, and more prosperous. That's right. The evidence shows, the research shows sanctuary jurisdictions have lower crime rates, higher median household income, less poverty, less reliance on public assistance, higher labor force participation, and lower unemployment. That's right. Seems like sanctuary cities are helping to make America great. I said it. So let's stop perpetuating the lies. Let's ensure that ICE and CBP agents are accountable and conduct their jobs in accordance with the law and the Constitution. Let's allow local law enforcement leaders to do what they deem is best for public safety. And Mr. Chairman, just so you know, I'm not exaggerating in my claims here. I'd like to submit for the record articles and reports from researchers at the University of Texas, Austin, from the Center for American Progress, from the University of Arizona, University of North Carolina, and the American Immigration Council. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.
Secretary Wolf, thank you for your service. Why, in your opinion, do so many, not all, but so many of my Democratic colleagues believe in open borders?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a couple of different fronts. One, it would be they don't believe in immigration law. They don't like enforcement. They don't like removing of individuals. And they believe that there are some that believe that anyone and everyone should be able to come to the U.S., whether they apply for protections under U.S. law or not. And then there's some probably that would like to see more voters in the U.S. as well.
Ms. Vaughn, some of my colleagues, for whom I have great respect, believe that the 10th Amendment allows local governments to ignore federal immigration law and implement sanctuary policy. The Supreme Court has ruled that racial quotas represent a pernicious form of racial discrimination. Can local governments ignore that ruling under the 10th Amendment?
Well, the 10th Amendment is about.
Can just answer my question, please, ma'am.
The 10th Amendment is about commandeering, and so it's not really appropriate to this because.
Is the answer yes or no, ma'am?
Could you ask me again? Because I don't understand the relevance to, I'm sorry, I don't, because
Secretary
ICE
Wolf,
is not asking them
Secretary Wolf,
to do
you heard
that.
my question. Under the guise of the 10th Amendment, can local governments ignore a Supreme Court ruling?
I don't believe they can.
Okay. Women have the right to vote in America by statute and by constitutional interpretation. Under the guise of the 10th Amendment, can local governments just ignore that and prohibit women from voting?
No.
Okay. Mr. Duke, you worked for President Biden and Vice President Harris, didn't you?
Yes.
And I listened carefully to your testimony today. You expressed, well, you offered the opinion that the One Big Beautiful Bill is terrible in part because it will cause deficits. Is that right?
Yes.
Isn't it a fact that the profligacy of President Biden caused 9% inflation in America?
No.
Okay. Isn't it a fact that if President Biden had discovered life on Mars when he was president, he would have immediately sent it money?
I don't believe so.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, I appreciate your newly found fiscal conservatism. Mr. Beer, you seem to be a very smart guy, and you seem to be a nice enough guy.
Thank you, Senator. You seem smart as well.
Jack.
Don't
That was the
you,
chairman, not me.
don't you think your hyperbolic statements undermine your credibility?
What hyperbolic statement did I make?
On February the 11th, 2026, you posted on Bluesky, quote, my words, or your words, not mine. The Democrats' video telling service members to ignore illegal orders didn't go far enough. They should have also urged them to refuse unethical orders, whether illegal or not. There are many things deemed legal that are still obviously unethical, and everyone should hold themselves to this higher law, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
I believe you did. Do you disagree with it? You think people should do unethical things and their capacity
On December the 31st of 2025, you posted in front of God.
But wait,
in
do
front
you,
of-
do you
in
disagree
front
with
of-
what I
Let me
said?
finish my question.
I'm
You
sorry.
answered, sir. Sure. In front of God and country, you said, quote, "They," referring to Republicans, "think they can troll their way into us accepting ethnic cleansing." End quote. Your words, not mine. Did I read that correctly?
That was in regard to a
Did I
Department of
read that?
Homeland
Did I
Security
read
post
that?
about advocating 100 million deportations. That is what DHS has tweeted from their own account. 100 million deportations
hurts, doesn't
would
it?
be ethnic cleansing. You would be
Truth hurts,
removing
doesn't it?
1/3 of the country. So yes, there
Truth
are
can
people
just
within the
gut you like
Department
a
of
fish.
Homeland
And
Security.
you don't think this is hyperbolic? Give me 30 more seconds.
I think advocating 100 million
I'm having,
deportations
I'm
is
having fun here, Mr.
ethnic
Chairman.
cleansing.
On February
Yes.
5th, you quoted, you said the following on Bluesky.
Your time's
Quote,
up.
"These are all good, but there's no enforcement mechanism." I'm sorry, let me try a better one. On March 2nd, you said, quote, "If you rule against Trump's population purge agenda," no hyperbole there, "the nativists will name you, threaten you, and come after you. These judges are much braver than the ICE agents who hide behind masks while violating the Constitution."
They are
Close
much
quote.
braver. They put their names on their rulings and they stand behind their constitutional rulings. When I talk about population purge, I'm talking about the fact that they're trying to deport U.S.-born citizens, people born here. They are trying to deport them as well. So it's not a mass deportation agenda. It is also an agenda intended to reduce the population of the United States, including U.S.-born people.
thank
So
you.
these are not
Wait.
hyperbolic statements. I appreciate you reading my account. I appreciate
Here's
your
the good
research.
news.
What planet did you just, wait a minute, Mr. Chairman, what planet did you just parachute in from?
No. Hey, guys.
You trigger my gag reflex, Mr. Beaver.
So we got a process here, and it's good to know you don't have an agenda. Senator King.
Mr. Chair, thanks for doing this. And Sheriff, welcome. I've got a Virginian at the table. That's why I wanted to come. My sheriff in his testimony said, "It is important to distinguish criminal aliens who pose a threat to our community from immigrants here legally." All of us agree with that. We should try to find that balance. I don't think we're balanced right now. I've been here 13 years. I wish we'd have a hearing about the positive impact immigrants make on the United States. We've never had that hearing in this committee or the HELP committee or any others. When we have hearings, it's about immigrants doing bad things rather than about the
Well, y'all were in
positives that
charge. Why
immigrants do.
didn't you have them?
Well, can I take my time? Can I take my time? Because I think what happens, I think what happens when
Get a whole minute
the
more.
only hearings about immigrants are about crime, and we have a president who calls people's countries shithole countries. I got a lot of immigrants in the United States and in Virginia who feel like they're being targeted. And let's talk about positives. And I'm going to use Loudoun as an example. The sheriff is rightly proud of Loudoun County. 420,000 people in the last census. It's probably coming up to 450 now. It is not only one of the safest jurisdictions in the United States, it's also, by recent count, the wealthiest county in the United States. And guess what? 25% of the population and climbing is immigrant. 25%. Safe, economically successful, immigrant. And I also applaud this sheriff's department. If you have something to do, or if you don't have something to do on Halloween sometime, go to the Halloween parade in Leesburg, and you'll see the sheriff's deputies helping order. And they all wear uniforms with their names on them. None of them wear masks. The county's been an innovator in body camera use. Wow, what a novel concept. I like the professionalism that I see with your sheriff's department, and I think we could use it at the federal level. Here's an issue about sanctuary cities in the Trump administration. DHS, Mr. Chair, you might like this one. DHS in May put out a list of sanctuary cities, and they included 34 Virginia communities, cities and counties on that list. It provoked laughter in Virginia. There were cities that were not cities but counties. There were counties that were not counties but cities. There were jurisdictions that have virtually no immigrants whatsoever listed as sanctuary communities. Here was my favorite. the city of Duffield, Virginia. Now, if you don't know where Duffield is, you're not alone. Scott County, deep in Appalachia, 0.6 square miles, 76 people, not a single immigrant, not even a police department, sanctuary city. Virginia laughed the DHS out of the office. And so in October, this was in May. In August, DOJ came back and did a new list, number of sanctuary cities in Virginia, 0. They redid the list in October, number of sanctuary cities in Virginia, 0. Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce DHS's bogus sanctuary cities list into the record.
Without objection.
And then, Mr. Chair, my last question is, look, I'm not on judiciary, and the bill that you have about imposing liability on local officials would suggest that the only fault in this area lies on local officials. Now, if you have a markup, it'll be in judiciary, and I'm not on it, but my question is sort of for you. Isn't what's good for the goose good for the gander? What about all the times when I was governor of Virginia, 2006, 2010, and my DOC, Department of Corrections, or local law enforcement told ICE and the federal immigration agencies, 3 years under President Bush, 1 year under President Obama, that, hey, we've got somebody here who is not lawfully here. Please come pick them up. And ICE didn't show up. And ICE still is not showing up. So often, the bad examples, including one of the ones in Fairfax recently, repeated instances of ICE having this person in their purview, in their grasp, and then letting him go. So wouldn't it be, I mean, if you're going to do a bill and blame cities for this and try to impose liability on their local taxpayers, what about letting people sue ICE when hardworking local officials and sheriffs let folks know, hey, we got folks here that are here unlawfully, come pick them up. And when they don't come pick them up, shouldn't they be liable for that?
Yeah, maybe that's something we could do together. Sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Be glad to work with you.
Well,
I think those days are probably over with this administration, but the idea that the federal government had notice and the local community is willing to turn them over and they turned a blind eye and somebody got hurt, I would be willing definitely to create liability there.
And I'll just conclude, Mr. Chair, and say, the mayor in me, the governor in me, gets mad when things like this get blamed on mayors and governors, when often it's complete dysfunction at the federal level under multiple administrations. That's the real culprit. I yield back.
Right. The lawyer in me wants to hold people accountable who create problems. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for holding this important hearing. The United States is a nation of law and order. Those two things go hand in hand because when you have laws that are obeyed, you have order in your communities. But for too long, liberal states and cities have decided to simply ignore the federal laws they don't agree with. When I was the governor of Florida, I didn't have to worry about our sheriffs not enforcing the law because President Trump and our federal law enforcement have to worry about that every day. The American people voted very clearly to secure the border. That's what the election was about, and stop illegal immigration. We're a country of legal immigration, not illegal immigration. And without a single new law being enacted, President Trump has delivered and secured the border when President Biden said he couldn't do it. President Trump and the heroic men and women of our ICE and Border Patrol are enforcing our laws, and they're securing our nation, and the crime rate is down. But some Americans say, no, we won't follow federal law. We want to be a sanctuary for people who broke the law to enter our country illegally. It is a violation, it's against the law to come into our country illegally, like most countries. It's dangerous, it's costly to the American taxpayer, and has horrific consequences. That's why I and my colleague on this committee, Senator Moreno, have introduced 2 bills to curb this kind of dangerous disregard for the law. Our Unifying American Security Interest Act and Sanctuary Jurisdiction Event Security Enhancement Act, which stop DHS funding grants and financial assistance from going to cities and jurisdictions that refuse to support our ICE and DHS agents in their efforts to keep our streets safe. Americans clearly don't want their tax dollars used for handouts to illegal aliens for health care or food stamps while we have American citizens here at home who are going without. And that's the exact kind of waste and financial mismanagement that these bills will stop. But that's just the financial cost. Let's talk about the human cost. Laken Riley, a nursing student, 22 years old, in Georgia was beaten with a rock and strangled by a Venezuelan illegal alien who had been caught at the border and released under Biden's open borders rules. Rachel Marin, 37, of Maryland, mother of 5, who was raped and murdered while hiking by a Salvadoran criminal alien who crossed our border illegally, not once, not twice, but 3 times under Biden. Kate Steinle, 32, died in her father's arms on a San Francisco pier after being shot by a 5-time Mexican deportee who was allowed to roam freely because the city's sanctuary policy led local officials to ignore an ICE detainer. These are just a few of the many lives cut short and the potential unrealized lives because of Biden's open borders that allowed dangerous people to come into this country and the sanctuary cities that chose to support and encourage these criminals. I'm from Florida. We are an immigration state, legal immigration. We don't support illegal immigration. Sheriff Chapman, my question, how can open borders and lax immigration policies like a sanctuary cities be considered humane by Democrats if they fail to protect the very citizens Democrats and other elected officials are meant to serve and they're under an oath of office to serve?
Well, I agree with that. I mean, the most important thing is for us to keep safety, keep our people safe, and we've got to do everything in our power, and that includes working with everybody. And I make that point all the time to my constituents, say, look, we want to work with all of our federal counterparts. We all have different missions here, different cogs in the wheel, but we all have to work together to keep everybody safe.
Is it better for you if you turn a criminal over to ICE rather than let them back into the community?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mr. Wolf, in sanctuary cities, local authorities can decline ICE detainers, which means that criminals are released back in the community rather than transferred safely into ICE custody. This creates opportunities for illegal fugitives to relocate or reoffend, like in the tragic murder of Kate Steinle. It also forces DHS officers to go into neighborhoods to root out violent criminals. Not only does this cost the taxpayer more, it also increases the risk for everyone involved, including bystanders, DHS officers, and potential future victims. How do these policies prioritize offenders over American victims by obstructing deportations?
Well, when ICE is required to go into a community out on the streets, right, instead of going into that jail setting and picking up that criminal illegal alien, it'll take 1 or 2 officers to go into a jail setting. If they have to go into their neighborhood, it's going to take 15 to 20 officers to apprehend that same individual. You're putting not only officers at risk, you're putting that alien at risk, and you're putting others in that community at risk. So the idea here, and it's an ironic kind of play here, is that individuals and politicians that want less ICE in their jurisdictions, they will give them sanctuary policies to say, we want ICE out. But in fact, it just requires them to be more in their communities because they won't go into a jail setting. They have to go into their neighborhoods. They have to continue to enforce immigration law. So if your idea is, I want to see less ICE in my community, I don't like immigration enforcement, let them into your jail. Let them pick up those criminal illegal aliens. Otherwise, they're going to be out on your streets because they have to continue to enforce immigration law. And of course, it's better with local law enforcement support and cooperation. But again, in many jurisdictions, sanctuary jurisdictions, we don't see that either.
Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for all of you. Can just do a very simple, if it's okay, yes or no. I'm going to try to ask it as a simple yes or no question. Are you familiar with USC 1325?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
You're not? Okay. So the law passed in 1952 is the Immigration Naturalization Act. It talked about how the country controls immigration. Mr. Wolf, start with you. Do you think that we made a mistake passing that law that prohibits people from entering this country illegally?
No, I don't think that's a mistake.
Sheriff, do you believe we made a mistake passing that law?
No, I don't think so.
Ms. Vaughn?
No.
Maria?
It was a mistake to not let them come legally. That's what we need.
But that's not what the law said. The law said you can't enter the country illegally. Was that
There were definitely
was
mistakes in the INA.
Was that
Many
part,
mistakes.
Don't be cute. Was that part of the law a mistake? Yes or no?
The part of the law that says you can't come legally, yes, that was a mistake.
That was a mistake that you can't come illegally.
No, legally. Legally is what I said.
Okay. So you haven't answered my question, but that's okay. You're a smug guy, and that's part of your shtick. How about you?
I don't know anything about this law.
Do you think it should be a crime to enter the country illegally?
I don't know anything about this. I'm here to talk
Well,
about budgets with the budget.
You don't have to, look, I'm not a lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer. It's a simple question. Should it be a crime, I'll say it slowly, should it be a crime to enter the United States of America illegally?
I don't know
without
anything
permission?
about this.
Do you have a home?
I run.
Do you have a place that you sleep in?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Should it be a crime for people to enter your home without permission?
Yes.
You're pretty certain on that one?
Yes.
Okay, but you're not sure if it's okay to enter America without permission? Which is our home, by the way. You don't know about America? Okay, gotcha. All right, so this is the best the Democrats can come up with, Mr. Chairman. I hope the ranking member can listen for just a second, if you don't mind. This is the best witnesses you've got. A guy who can't distinguish whether it's okay to have people enter our country illegally. Of all the millions of people that you could have chosen to testify.
To my good colleague.
Let me finish. The best you have is a guy who has no idea what our immigration law is and isn't sure if somebody should enter the country illegally. Another guy is a smug guy who obviously has an agenda. And in fact, let me just ask you a question, because I'll just ask you
Maybe stick to the facts instead of badgering the witnesses.
Not badgering the witnesses.
Well, you're
I'm asking
attacking them.
simple questions.
Yeah, why don't you ask them actual
But
factual
why don't you do this?
questions?
Why don't you speak when it's your turn? Because we actually
You're
take
addressing
turns.
me, so I'm addressing you back.
Because
You're looking right at me. You're addressing me.
Here's what I find ironic is that you follow rules here about speaking order. People can't speak out of turn, but it's okay with you that people enter our country and skip the turn. See,
now you're attributing views to me I haven't expressed. Isn't that interesting?
What I would love to find interesting.
Not only you're attacking witnesses, now you're attacking your colleagues here on the dais.
So
I think very inappropriate.
You make it easy. All right, back to you.
Wait a minute. I'm in charge.
Yes, sir.
You ask him a question.
Yes.
He'll get a chance to answer that question. Finish your time.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next question. Mr. Sheriff, how important is it for local law enforcement to cooperate with federal officials?
I can tell you it's worked for us, and it's kept our crime rate down extraordinarily low.
So if somebody is in your position in Hamilton County, which is the county where Cincinnati is, or the Cincinnati Chief of Police, would you advise them that you think it's helpful to cooperate with law enforcement?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you find it interesting that that politicians who have no idea, no background in law enforcement will pass laws that prohibit law enforcement to cooperate with federal officials, local law enforcement? Do you think that's a good idea?
No, it's not a good idea.
It's a terrible idea. Do you have death threats against your sheriff deputies on a regular basis?
We get threats, not that often, but we do.
Constant
Yes.
death threats, or do you get constant?
No, not constant death threats, but we do get threats, yes.
Do you have drug cartels that have bounties out for your deputies?
No, we don't.
Do you get your agents doxxed where they go to your deputies' homes and threaten their children and their wives and their kids?
No, we have not.
Do you get politicians that call your deputies Gestapo and Nazis?
We've had certainly not politicians, not locally here, but certainly we've had a lot of people in the community that have said that.
Do you find any of that helpful when talking about law enforcement agencies? Because see, here's the irony. What we're disparaging is the people whose job it is to enforce the laws, and I find it extraordinarily interesting that the people in charge of making these laws are disparaging the people who are enforcing those laws. And I wonder, and I'll ask for the record if the minority witnesses could just sign an affidavit that they have not received any money and the organization that they work for or participate in from any organizations tied to the Mexican drug cartels, which would have an absolute incentive to have illegal migration at the levels that we saw under Biden.
If you have any reason.
We haven't accepted any drug cartel money.
Okay.
Again, if they could just put that in affidavit or an affiliated organization.
You okay, Mr. Duke?
I'd like to look at the affidavit.
Okay, fair enough. But do you know if you've accepted any money?
I do not know of anything like that.
Right. Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. All right, so good hearing. Senator Merkley, I'll let you go first. I'll have a few words and we'll go vote.
Well, let's start with the Gang of Eight. my colleague referred to from 2013. Democrats and Republicans came together, 4 and 4. They crafted a bill on immigration. Path to citizenship for dreamers, Democrats and Republicans together. So one of the myths we've heard today from some of my colleagues is that Democrats don't support the rule of law. Absolutely wrong. What happened to that 2013 bill that went over to the House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans? They would not even hold a hearing on it. They wanted to keep an open sore of immigration as a political issue. In 2024, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate came together again, crafted a deal, and it was President Trump as a candidate who said, don't do it, I want to keep immigration as an election issue. So I just think it would be more productive if we quit casting aspersions across the aisle and go back to the philosophy of 2013 and work together to actually get a bill done, or the philosophy of 2024. And certainly all of us agree in going after violent criminals. That's the second myth that was presented today, that people don't support going after violent criminals. Absolutely a myth, and it's just irritating to continuously hear that. Myth number 3 from one of my colleagues was that Democrats won't fund FEMA. In fact, last week in the Senate, we asked unanimous consent to fund FEMA and the Coast Guard and TSA, and it was the Republicans that objected. So let's clear up that piece. The next myth, that is that undocumented individuals receive benefits. It is illegal under the law for undocumented individuals to receive Medicaid or Medicare or CHIP or SNAP or Social Security benefits. Another myth, that states that have decided that local police are more effective being local police somehow attract immigrants because they're not held accountable to the law. They are held accountable to the law. In fact, you have lower crime rates in those states. So that's kind of interesting. And in fact, we see that some states, like Texas, they have 50% more undocumented immigrants as a ratio of population than Oregon does. So clearly it's not Oregon's policies that say we're more effective and safer and more prosperous when ICE does ICE and local police do local police work. And yet another myth. One of my colleagues across the aisle said states do not have powers. He says they do not have rights, but they do have powers, 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the U.S. by the Constitution are reserved to the states and to the people. And that is why the federal government cannot commandeer individuals in the states to do federal responsibilities. It's called the Constitution of the United States of America. Another myth was that it's less safe in states where local police do local police work. There's many statistics that show the opposite of that. But let's just take, for example, where is the highest murder rate in America? Is it in a state where local police are assigned to local police? No. It's Mississippi. Who's the second highest murder rate? Louisiana. How's the murder rate in Oregon? It is 1/4 of what is in those states. So let's be clear again, this myth that you have higher crime rates in places where the local police gain the trust of the people, work carefully between state and local and with federal officials, but they don't do the work of ICE. And if ICE knows that someone is in a jail, and they know because it's in the federal database, in the FBI database, and they want that person, it only takes a couple days to go get a judicial warrant and pick that person up. Every time there's a judicial warrant, that person is held. So if it's just being lazy or sloppy or whatever else, there's a whole lot of misinformation coming forward here that needed to be corrected.
Well, thank you very much. I have a different view of things. Really appreciate the hearing. Obama deported 3 million people. I don't think all of them were criminals. They didn't use judicial warrants. What you're trying to do is make it impossible to deport people. If you have to go to a judge and get a judicial warrant to deport somebody, you effectively destroy the ability to deport. You're denying Trump the same system you are giving Obama. This hearing to me is stunning. I'm so glad we had it. You're all in on sanctuary city policy. If you're looking to America, if you're looking for anybody to change this system, our Democratic friends have no interest. They think it's good for America. The more illegal immigrants, the better. I don't. I'd like to have a rational immigration system. Gang of Eight, I was involved in it. What we try to do is stop future flow, and the trade-off was to give people a pathway to citizenship, knowing you would stop future flow. You're right, the House blocked the bill. During 2020 to 2024, Joe Biden destroyed every concept of rational immigration. He made it impossible for a Republican to sit down and talk with a Democrat because during his 4 years, he took every rule and ignored it. There are no taxpayer dollars associated with legal immigrants. They were flown into the country on airplanes. They were bussed in. They were fed. They were giving housing. 11 million people are not living in the streets. They're in some apartment or a house somewhere. And if you don't think that affects housing, that's crazy. 11 million people came at least in a 4-year period, and to hear you say it, no impact on this country. That's just absurd. So what are we going to do? We're going to try to start with the magnets. If you don't think sanctuary city policy is a magnet for future illegal immigration, that's just insane. How can you fix it if you don't take the magnets off the table? The bottom line is, I want a vote on my bill to hold local and state officials accountable for violating federal law when they should enforce it like they did during Obama, and you won't let me have a vote. You won't let me have the debate. The reason you don't want to vote is because 70 to 80% of the American public think the policies you're pushing are harmful. There is a budget impact to being overrun in a country in a 4-year period. To think this is not a problem is insulting to the American people. It is a problem, and you try to rationalize it and make it a good thing. It's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. At the end of the day, if you can't answer the question, it should be a crime to come into the country legally, that says all you really need to know about the people here. Of course it should be. It should be a crime, as Senator Moreno said, to go in your house without being voted. We cannot have a sovereign nation when people just show up and come in and go anywhere they want to go. That's just not rational. We've got more people on the terrorist watch list than we've ever had, 2,700%. The people who've come here are all not well-meaning. I understand immigration pretty well. I understand the need to fix it. The American people want to be fair, but Senator Merkley, they're not going to buy into a system that constantly allows people to come in unchecked. Once you could prove to them you've stopped illegal immigration, then we could have a rational discussion about what to do with people who've been here a long time. But you've doubled or tripled the number of people. So all I will say, this is a debate worthy of a great nation. Our Democratic friends are accepting of a sanctuary policy. They don't think it's a problem. I do. Let's have a debate. Let's have a vote. This will be good for the country going into 2026 as to who should be in charge of controlling our borders and enforcing law. This administration is enforcing the law. The prior administration obliterated the law. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. I appreciate your time and attention. Senator Merkley, thank you. The hearing is adjourned. And, one second. I want to introduce a statement. Yeah, you can finish up. Donald Rosenberg was unable to be here. I'd like to put his statement in the record. He represents victims of legal alien crime. Without objection, I'd like to introduce his statement, if that's okay. Is it okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. I want to thank our witnesses for preparing for the committee. You want to finish your thought? Go ahead.
Mr. Beer, you have a pile of documents. Did you want to enter those into the record? What are those documents?
Without objection.
These are all the studies.
Okay.
These are all the studies that show that immigrants do not increase crime, and places that place restrictions on ICE cooperation are not resulting in an increase in crime.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Okay, the hearing record will remain open until noon tomorrow for the submission of questions for the record to the committee clerk. The hearing is adjourned. Thank you all very, very much.